At Christmas dinner, all 12 chairs were filled except mine. Outside with the dogs, my brother joked. I set down Dad's box and whispered, "Check under your plate after dessert." This isn't just a story about a family Christmas gone wrong. It's about the brutal shock of being erased by the people you love most, and the fight to reclaim not just what's rightfully yours, but your very identity. I walked into my childhood home expecting holiday cheer and instead found myself utterly, brutally written out of the narrative. I pulled into the circular driveway, the crunch of my tires on fresh snow usually a comforting sound, a signal I was home. But that day, after a 4-hour drive from Seattle that left my back aching, it was just another layer of unease. Christmas lights twinkled along the roof, painting the pristine white yard in a picture-perfect, utterly deceptive glow. The front door, always unlocked, felt like a trap. I paused in the entryway, listening to the familiar clinking of silverware, the murmur of family voices, the dropping of ice cubes into crystal tumblers. For a split second, I was 10 again, breathless with anticipation. "Anyone home?" I called out, unwinding my scarf. And then silence. Complete, deafening silence. Each step I took on the hardwood floor echoed in the sudden void. When I reached the dining room archway, the scene that greeted me was something out of a nightmare, freezing my blood despite the abundant heat. 12 place settings gleamed on the mahogany table, 12 chairs waiting, 12 crystal goblets catching the light from Mom's prized chandelier. But not a single one was for me. My brother, Harlan, looked up from his spot near the head of the table. 40 years old, but he still had that same smug half-smile he wore as a kid when he'd stolen the last cookie. "Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence," he drawled, adjusting his color. "Maybe your plates. Out back with the cats." My own mother, my mom, didn't even meet my eyes. Her hands moved methodically among the centerpiece flowers, rearranging sprigs of pine and holly as if their precise placement could somehow ward off the suffocating awkwardness filling the room. "Not now," she murmured to my Aunt Margaret, who had started to whisper something. And there, in my chair, third from the left, the one with the slight wobble Dad never fixed, sat Tessa, my cousin, draped across it with an arrogance that suggested she'd been sitting there 100 times. She gave me a thin smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Isolde," she said, the words landing like individual slaps. "We weren't expecting you. We weren't expecting you." I stood there, absolutely still, acutely aware of 12 pairs of eyes, tracking my every move. Some held pity, some curiosity, a few barely disguised satisfaction. The Christmas tree lights shimmered in the window behind them, creating small explosions of color that only mocked the cold void spreading through my chest. I reached into my purse, my hand shaking slightly, and pulled out a small, silver-wrapped box, no bigger than my palm. The entire room watched as I walked to the table, my heels striking a steady rhythm against the floor. I placed the package next to Harlan's plate, my fingers lingering on it. For just a moment. "Check under your plate," I said, my voice shockingly steady. Harlan's smirk faltered. "What?" he asked. "When you're ready to face what you've done," I told him, "check under your plate." I turned, not waiting for a response, and walked back toward the door, my back straight, my steps unhurried. No one called after me. No one followed. The only sound was the soft rustle of my coat as I pulled it back on. Outside, the snow fell harder now, big, fat flakes drifting through the glow of the porch light. I sat in my car, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, and finally allowed myself to feel the full, crushing weight of their rejection. Memories flashed, a brutal slideshow. I'd arrived early, hoping to help with preparations, just like I always did. The house had been quiet, everyone still dressing. I'd wandered into the living room, seeking the comfort of holiday traditions, and found the first sign, above the fireplace, where 12 stockings hung in a neat row. Mine was conspicuously absent. My eyes had moved to the mantel, where family photos chronicled holidays past. The frame that once held a picture of Dad and Me building the backyard fence now displayed Tessa and Mom in matching Christmas sweaters. When the family finally descended, Mom had hugged me briefly, a perfunctory embrace nothing like the warm, lingering one she gave Tessa moments later. I'd watched, silent, as they moved around me like water, flowing around a stone in a riverbed. 2 months earlier, I'd driven up unannounced, finding the house empty. Some magnetic pull had drawn me to Dad's study, preserved since his passing like a museum exhibit. The locked cabinet in the corner had called to me, and I remembered the key he'd shown me years before, just in case, Izzy, he'd said, hidden behind the loose brick in the fireplace. What I found inside changed everything. Just last week, when I'd called Mom about Christmas arrangements, her voice had been distant, distracted. Well, dear, we're doing things differently this year. Limited seating, you understand. Before I could respond, Harlan's voice broke in, the phone apparently snatched from Mom's hand. Look, it's just easier this way. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. The same dismissal I'd heard my entire life whenever something hurt too much to name. That's when I knew. I'll be there, I'd said, my voice laced with steel. Save me a seat. I'd spent the next week preparing the small silver box, the evidence, the truth that would change everything. Now, as I started the car, I glanced back at the house one last time. Through the dining room window, I could see them gathered, continuing their meal as if I'd never interrupted. As if I'd never existed. My chair stayed empty, but not for long. I pulled away, snow crunching beneath my tires, and drove into the darkness, leaving behind the family that had chosen to erase me, and the proof that would force them to remember. 3 days later, back in Seattle, I hung the last Christmas card on the thin ribbon strung across my apartment window. 23 in all, from colleagues, clients, my massage therapist, even the barista who remembered my name at the corner cafe. The string sagged with their weight, but held. Outside, Seattle disappeared behind a curtain of winter rain. None from family. My fingers brushed against the weathered leather portfolio hidden beneath a stack of marketing briefs. 3 days since my Christmas visit, and I still hadn't returned it to the safety deposit box. Some evidence I thought should stay close. The leather still carried the faint scent of Dad's study, pipe tobacco, and lemon furniture polish. I unfastened the tarnished clasp, my fingers tracing the initials M.E., Marshall Ellery, as if touching his hand one last time. The notarized will sat on top, crisp and formal. Below it, his letter rested. In its envelope, corners soft from my repeated readings. I knew every word by heart, but I needed to see his handwriting again, the places where the pen pressed harder, where his emotion showed through. You never asked for anything, Izzy. His familiar scrawl blurred as tears threatened. You just stayed. You protected me. This house is yours. You've earned it. I turned to the legal document with its stark, impersonal language that contradicted everything Harlan had told the family. The house in Washington. 17 acres in Idaho where Dad used to talk about building a cabin. His savings, $132,000. All of it left to me, his faithful daughter, Isolde Marie Ellery. A tear splashed onto the paper. I wiped it quickly, afraid of smudging his signature. Memories attacked again, a slow, insidious creep. Harlan arriving for weekend visits after Dad's diagnosis, staying longer each time. His casual commandeering of Dad's study for important business calls. Mom yielding to his decisions with a relieved sigh, happy to surrender the weight of responsibility. Harlan has always been good with money, she'd say, as if this excused everything. I remembered returning from a grocery run to find Tessa wearing my old cardigan, feet propped on the ottoman where Dad and I used to play chess. Joyce said I could use it, she'd explained with a tight smile. You don't mind, do you? By the time Dad's confusion deepened, Tessa had moved into my childhood bedroom. Just temporarily, Mom assured me. It makes more sense. You're not here most of the time. The worst part wasn't the clothes or the bedroom. It was the photographs. One by one, Images of Dad and me disappeared from the Walsauer fishing trip to Lake Wenatchee, building the gazebo, his proud smile at my college graduation. Replaced by photos where Tessa stood central, arm linked with Mom's, while Dad sat confused in the background. My phone vibrated against the coffee table. Sarah, my assistant. Tell me you're not working today, she said when I answered. Just organizing, I replied, closing the portfolio. Nothing important. Liar, her voice softened. You found something in your dad's papers, didn't you? That's why you went up there for Christmas. In the 3 years Sarah had worked with me, she'd never pushed for personal details. But she was there the day Harlan called to tell me Dad had been moved to a care facility for his own good, without consulting me. They took everything, I whispered. Or tried to. Those bastards. The venom in her voice surprised me. What are you going to do? Before I could answer, another call buzzed through. Warren Clement, Dad's attorney for 30 years. Call you back, I told Sarah. Warren's voice sounded older than I remembered. Isolde, I've been trying to reach you. There's unusual activity on your father's accounts. My stomach dropped. What kind of activity? Harlan attempted to list the Idaho property with a realtor in Coeur d'Alene. They called me for verification since my name is on the deed filing. Can he do that? No, but he's trying. Warren paused. There's something else. Your mother called asking about amendments to the will. She seemed surprised when I mentioned your father's final intentions. A text notification flashed from Betty, our neighbor for 20 years. Strange trucks at the house yesterday. Moving things out. Should I be concerned? I forwarded it to Warren. Isolde, we need to meet tomorrow, if possible. The next afternoon, Warren's office smelled of leather and paper, unchanged since my childhood. Visits with Dad. Warren slid documents across his desk. His arthritis-swollen fingers tapped a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Your father amended his will 3 times in the last year of his life. Each time, he was more specific about his wishes. Warren's eyes found mine. Your father knew exactly what he was doing, Isolde. My voice caught in my throat. Harlan sent an email to the family claiming I abandoned Dad, that I wasn't there when it mattered. Marshall anticipated this. Warren handed me another document, a calendar with my visits marked in Dad's shaky handwriting. Every weekend, sometimes midweek, notes about what we ate, shows we watched, conversations we had. And this, he said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name on it. He asked me to give you this, if there was ever any question about his intentions. Inside, a single photo, Dad and me on his 70th birthday rebuilding the garden bench. His arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing. On the back, his handwriting, the only one who never left. Can they fight this? I asked, a tremor in my voice. Warren shook his head. Not successfully, but they'll try. He slid a final document toward me. This secures everything legally. Your signature here makes it official. As I signed, I thought of the family gathered around the Christmas table without me. They think they've won, I said, capping the pen. Warren's smile was small but fierce. They have no idea what's coming. I left with the portfolio tucked under my arm, heavier now with additional documentation but somehow easier to carry. For the first time since Dad's diagnosis, I felt the slow burn of vindication, replacing the hollow ache of betrayal. Christmas may have been their gathering, but truth would be mine. The next morning, my phone buzzed for the 3rd time. Harlan again. I let it ring through to voicemail, placing its screen down on the kitchen counter while I poured another cup of coffee. The red notification light blinked accusingly through my apartment's morning shadows. When the silence returned, I pressed play, holding the phone away from my ear as if his voice might contaminate me. Isolde, this family has responsibilities you clearly don't understand. His voice carried that familiar patronizing tone, the one he'd perfected after Dad got sick. Mom's upset. Call her back so we can discuss what Dad would have wanted. I deleted the message without saving it, adding it to the collection of Harlan's manipulations that had filled my voicemail over the past week. Asterisk what Dad would have wanted. Asterisk, as if Harlan had any idea. The mail arrived with a soft thud through the slot. Christmas cards cascaded onto the entryway floor. Bright, festive rectangles of forced cheer. Most were from colleagues and friends. But 3 bore handwriting I recognized: Aunt Margaret, Cousin Philip, Uncle James. I opened them one by one, my stomach tightening as I read. We miss you at family gatherings. Asterisk your mother says you're struggling. Asterisk sometimes we have to set aside differences for family harmony. Asterisk your father valued family above all else. Remember his example. Asterisk I placed them in a neat stack on the counter beside a stuffed manila envelope that had arrived yesterday. More letters from relatives, each one dripping with concern and gentle reprimands. Each one clearly informed by Harlan's version of events. My laptop screen glowed with notifications. Tessa had posted another round of photos. Her decorating the Christmas tree at my childhood home. Her hand on Mom's shoulder. Her sitting in Dad's favorite chair by the fireplace. The caption read, "Carrying on the Ellery family traditions. Blessed to be here. Family first." The coffee turned bitter on my tongue. My phone rang again. Joyce this time. I silenced it mid-ring. Not today, I whispered to the empty apartment. I grabbed my keys and drove across town to the storage unit I'd maintained since moving to Seattle. The metal door groaned as I rolled it upward, revealing stacked boxes marked with Dad's careful handwriting. I navigated past college furniture and old winter clothes to the back corner where his workbench tools waited, carefully wrapped in old blankets. The hammer felt solid in my hand, its wooden handle worn smooth from years of use. I unwrapped each tool slowly, the level with the slightly bubbled glass, the hand plane with Dad's initials scratched into the metal, the tape measure with faded numbers. A memory surfaced, bright and immediate. I was 14, holding boards steady while Dad measured. The backyard fence had collapsed during winter storms, and rebuilding it became our weekend project. The neighbors offered to help, but Dad refused. "This is ours, Izzy," he'd said, showing me how to level each post. Harlan had watched from the kitchen window, rolling his eyes at our dusty clothes and sunburned shoulders. "You know we could hire someone," he'd said when we finally came inside. "Normal families don't build their own fences." Dad had looked at him, something sad flickering across his face. "Some things are worth doing yourself, Harlan." Later, as we mixed concrete for the last post, Dad had placed his hammer in my small hands, closing my fingers around the handle. "It's not about who makes the most noise, Izzy," he'd said, his voice low and serious. "It's about who builds things that last." Now, years later, I pressed my forehead against the smooth wood of the hammer handle, breathing in the faint scent of sawdust that somehow still clung to it. "I remember. Dad," I whispered. "I remember everything." I packed the tools carefully into a box and loaded it into my car. The weight of them felt like armor somehow, protection against the storm of texts and calls trying to pull me back into their narrative. 3 days later, I spotted Tessa across the produce section at Morgan's Market. I considered abandoning my cart, avoiding the confrontation, but something stopped me. Dad's voice, perhaps. "Some things are worth doing yourself." She noticed me by the apples, her face arranging itself into a mask of concern so practiced it was almost convincing. "Isolde, we've all been so worried." She moved toward me, arms outstretched as if for a hug. I remained still, watching her arms slowly lower. When she realized I wouldn't step forward to meet them. "I'm perfectly fine," I said, selecting an apple and placing it carefully in my basket. "I'm sure you've made yourself quite comfortable in my absence." Her eyes narrowed slightly, the mask slipping. "You left, Isolde, we stayed. That matters." "So does the truth, Tessa," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "And it always finds its way home." She flinched, just slightly, but enough to confirm what I already knew. They were afraid of what I found, of what I knew. That evening, Warren called with updates. The paperwork was filed. Legally, they couldn't touch the property or accounts without triggering serious consequences. Sarah stopped by with dinner and helped me organize the final pieces of evidence, photographs, and bank statements spread across my dining table. Your brother is a real piece of work, she said, slipping another document into a folder. These withdrawals all coincided with your father's decline. Betty, my parents' neighbor, for 20 years, texted me photos of strangers coming and going from the house, moving furniture I recognized. Douglas, Dad's oldest friend, left a voicemail recounting how often Dad spoke of me with pride. He told me once, Douglas said, his voice crackling over the line, that you were the only one who saw him, not what he could give. Remember that, Isolde. The contrast struck me, my growing circle of support versus the blood relatives who'd chosen to erase me. Next week, Tuesday, I drove to the cemetery. The ground was hard with frost, crunching beneath my boots as I made my way to Dad's grave. I placed a small arrangement of holly and pine cones, things we used to gather together from the woods behind our house. They won't erase you from my story, Dad, I promised, my breath forming clouds in the cold air, or me from yours. Standing there with the winter sun breaking through bare branches, I felt a strange clarity settling over me. The hammer, the fence, the quiet lessons he imparted while Harlan was busy elsewhere. These were the real inheritance, not the house or land or money they were so desperate to claim. Back at the hotel, I prepared with methodical care. Each document copied, the most damning evidence placed in chronological order. I selected the photograph that would hurt them most, Dad and me on the porch swing, his arm around my shoulders, both of us laughing at some forgotten joke. The one Harlan took and later pretended didn't exist. I chose my clothes with equal care, a simple black dress, Dad's watch on my wrist, no jewelry beyond small pearl earrings he gave me for college. Graduation. Nothing flashy or dramatic, nothing that suggested I was coming for a fight. The small silver box sat on the hotel desk, waiting. Inside it, everything they feared, the truth laid bare in Dad's own handwriting. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. You don't have to do this alone. But I do, I whispered to myself. This moment belonged to me and the promises I'd made at a graveside that morning. As I drove toward the house, I rehearsed what I wouldn't say, what accusations I'd swallow, what anger I'd contain. This wasn't about confrontation, it was about truth. I parked in the circular driveway, taking a deep breath before stepping out into the cold. Through the dining room window, I could see them gathered, glasses raised in some toast I wasn't part of. The front door opened silently under my hand. The family fell quiet as I appeared in the doorway. The silver box tucked under my arm. Mom's face paled. Isolde, we weren't expecting, Joyce began, her voice trembling. I know, I said, my voice steady and clear in the sudden silence, but some things can't stay buried forever. I placed the box on the table, all eyes following my movement. No one spoke, no one moved. And in that frozen moment, I finally understood what Dad meant about building things that last. I drove through the snow-hushed streets, away from my childhood home, the taillights of my car painting the white landscape red. Lights twinkled from neighboring houses, blurring through tears I refused to shed. Not this time. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, again and again. The screen lit up with notifications. Joyce, Harlan, Tessa, even Aunt Margaret. The silver box I left behind had done its work. I pictured them scrambling now, the perfect dinner descending into chaos as they realized what I knew. Let them burn, I whispered to the empty car. At the hotel, I placed my phone face down on the nightstand without checking a single message. The evidence would speak for itself. Marshall's will. The bank statements showing my financial support during his illness. The calendar of my visits when they claimed I was absent. Truth needs no defense attorney. For the first time in months, I slept without waking, dreamless and deep. Morning brought 37 missed calls and 22 text messages. I scrolled through them while sipping coffee. By the window, watching the snow blanket the parking lot below. Joyce. Asterisk, we were just caught off guard. Please call us. Asterisk, Harlan. Let's meet. I think we misunderstood each other. Tessa. Asterisk, this isn't what you think. Asterisk, followed by a sad face emoji that made me laugh out loud. Cousins who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly remembered my existence. Uncle Robert wanted to clear things up. Aunt Margaret hoped we could talk this through like adults. I didn't block any of them, I simply didn't respond. 3 days passed. I returned to Seattle, to my apartment with its clean lines and absence of family photos. Sarah, my assistant, brought me coffee as I settled back into my office. How was the nuclear meeting? She asked, leaning against my desk. Radioactive, I answered, scrolling through work emails. You okay? I looked up, considering the question. Better than I've been in years. Sarah nodded, understanding without needing details. She'd seen the toll this family struggle had taken. Your brother called the office 4 times yesterday. And? I told him you were unavailable indefinitely. Her smile held no apology. The intercom buzzed an hour later. Sarah's voice came through, crisp and professional. Miss Ellery, your brother is here, without an appointment. My stomach tightened, but my voice remained steady. Tell him I'm in a meeting. 5 minutes later, Sarah appeared in my doorway. He won't leave. Says, it's about your father's will. I looked at the family photo I kept hidden in my desk drawer. Marshall and me on the porch swing, before the dementia, before the betrayal. I slipped it back inside and stood. I'll handle it. Harlan paced the reception area, his camel haircoat dusted with melting snowflakes. He looked smaller somehow, the swagger replaced with something approaching desperation. 15 minutes, Harlan, I said, not inviting him into my office. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. We need to talk about Dad's will. Sarah walked past, coffee mug in hand. Without missing a beat, she said, Miss Ellery isn't available to you. Harlan's face flushed. Tell her it's about Dad's will. Sarah looked at him, then at me, her expression calm but protective. She's quite aware of her father's will, Mr. Ellery. The shift happened visibly. Harlan's shoulders sagged an inch. The power had turned, like electricity suddenly flowing in the opposite direction. He came expecting to intimidate, to manipulate. Instead, he faced 2 women who saw through him completely. What do you want? I asked. To explain. His voice lacked its usual authority. There were arrangements. Arrangements you made while he wasn't lucid. The words tasted metallic, like blood. Arrangements that conveniently erased me. That's not, I have work to do, I said, turning toward my office. And you've had 2 years to explain. He left without another word, empty-handed. And diminished. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from Joyce. Her voice broke as she talked about family, misunderstandings, and healing old wounds. I deleted it halfway through. Harlan's text messages evolved over days, from demanding to pleading. We need to talk about this rationally became. Please call me back became I'm sorry. Betty from next door sent a photo, Tessa loading suitcases into her car, moving her things out of my bedroom, the room that was mine long before she claimed it. Family friends started calling me directly, not through Harlan as they'd done for months. Their voices held questions they didn't quite ask. The truth rippled outward, reshaping perceptions, correcting the narrative Harlan so carefully constructed. I drafted an email at Sarah's desk, her reassuring presence beside me. The message was simple, copies of the will attached, a brief explanation of Marshall's intentions, no accusations or drama. I sent it to the extended family with 1 click. Are you sure? Sarah asked. I nodded. Truth doesn't need embellishment. The next day, I made a public donation to the dementia care facility where Marshall spent his final weeks. The amount matched exactly what he left me in savings, $132,000. I listed it in his name with a note about dignity and memory care. My phone rang less frequently now. The messages turned respectful, even contrite. Joyce sent a photo, the family portrait with me and Marshall back on the mantle, restored to its place after months of absence. I didn't respond. Some silences speak volumes. A week later, I arrived 15 minutes early to Cliffside, a restaurant perched on the edge of Lake Washington where my family had requested this neutral meeting. The hostess led me to a private room in the back where floor-to-ceiling windows framed snow-dusted evergreens and slate-gray water. The table was already set for 4. Perfect. Warren wouldn't be expected. I took the seat facing the door and placed my leather portfolio on the table. Inside rested the pieces of a puzzle my family never expected me to solve. My fingertips traced the worn edges of my father's voice recorder, a simple device that would shatter their carefully constructed narrative. The door swung open. Mother entered first, her face a careful mask of maternal concern. Harlan followed, his shoulders squared in that boardroom posture he'd perfected over the years. Tessa trailed behind them, already looking for the quickest exit. Isolde. Mother attempted a tremulous smile. Thank you for coming. I gestured toward the empty chairs without rising. Please sit. They arranged themselves opposite me, a unified front. The waitress appeared with water, but I waved away menus. Just coffee for now. We should order, Harlan said, the slight twitch in his jaw, betraying his irritation. This might take a while. It won't, I replied. Mother reached across the table, her manicured fingers stopping just short of mine. Darling, we've had time to think about everything, about what your father really wanted for all of us. Have you? My voice remained level. Harlan leaned forward, his expression shifting to what he probably believed was compassionate understanding. Look, estate matters are complicated. Dad had good intentions, but he wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. Wasn't he? You know he wasn't, Tessa interjected, her voice honey-sweet. Marshall made promises to me too, to all of us. Mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a monogrammed handkerchief. You abandoned us when we needed you most. Isolde. Your father was confused. Harlan steeled his fingers. We're prepared to contest the will. Do you really want to drag the family through that kind of public spectacle? Your emotional state. After Dad died, Mother began, was perfectly sound, I interrupted, placing the small voice recorder on the table, as was his. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room, clear and steady. Warren, I need to be explicit about my wishes. Isolde will inherit everything, the house, the Idaho property, and my savings. Harlan's been trying to change the paperwork, but I'm telling you now, with full clarity of mind, this is what I want. A pause, then my father's laugh, so familiar it made my chest ache. Harlan thinks I don't notice what he's doing. Taking credit for the money Isolde sends, keeping her messages from me, but I see it all. She's the only one who stayed when it mattered, Warren. The only one. The recorder continued, but their faces told me they'd heard enough. Mother's carefully constructed facade crumbled, real tears replacing the performative ones. Harlan's face drained of color. The door opened behind them. Warren stepped in, carrying a thick folder. Their heads whipped around in unison. Perfect timing, I said. Warren placed the folder before me and took the empty chair at my side. I slid out the first document, bank statements showing regular transfers from my account to my father's care facility, each one followed by Harlan's emails to relatives taking credit. Next we have my calendar, I continued, pulling out a color-coded schedule. Every highlighted day represents a visit to Dad during his final year. 142 visits, to be exact. How many did you make? Harlan. His mouth opened, closed. I removed a letter with official letterhead. This is from Dr. Kessler, confirming Dad's mental competence when he revised his will. Another document joined the growing pile. And these are photos of me at Dad's bedside while the rest of you were, where? Exactly? Tessa, wasn't this around the time you were posting beach photos from San Diego? Tessa pushed back her chair and stood. I don't have to listen to this. Actually, you do, Warren said. Quietly. Since you've been living in a house you have no legal right to occupy. She left without another word. Mother collapsed into genuine sobs now, her shoulders shaking. Harlan's desperation filled his eyes as he leaned forward. We can split it fairly is 50-50? That's reasonable, isn't it? I gathered the documents back into my portfolio. This isn't about money, Harlan. It never was. Then what do you want? He demanded. Nothing you can give me now. I stood, suddenly, towering over them. The power shift was palpable, like gravity reversing. Dad knew who stayed when it mattered, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. He knew who was there to hold his hand, to remind him of his stories when he started forgetting them himself. Mother reached for my hand. Isolde, please. I withdrew gently but firmly from her grasp. I'm not erasing you. That was your choice for me. The portfolio tucked under my arm felt lighter than when I arrived. I walked toward the door, my steps unhurried. No one followed me. No one called my name. Outside, snow had begun to fall again, delicate flakes catching in my hair. I took a deep breath of sharp winter air, feeling it cut through the heaviness in my chest. In the car, I placed my hand on the small velvet box on the passenger seat. Inside rested the final revelation I chose not to share today, papers establishing a family trust in Marshall's name, ensuring my mother will never want for care herself. Some truths aren't weapons. Some are simply seeds, waiting for the right season to grow. I started the engine and drove away from the restaurant, from the family that chose to write me out of their story. This time, I'm the one holding the pen. 6 months have passed since I walked out of that perfect Christmas nightmare, and the world hasn't ended. If anything, it's expanded. Morning light spills across my Seattle apartment, catching the brass edge of Dad's photograph. Not the formal portrait Mom insisted we use at the funeral, but the candid one Betty sent me, Dad in his workshop, hammer raised mid-swing, laughing at something I'd set off camera. My phone buzzed with a text from Joyce. Can we meet, just once, please? I said it aside without answering. Not a rejection, just a postponement. Some conversations require perfect timing. The drive to what is now legally my childhood home takes exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. I know, because I've made the trip 12 times since winter, each visit easier than the last. The house no longer looms like an accusation. Today, it waits like a canvas. The memory oasis, I say aloud, testing the name on my tongue. Warren's paperwork for the respite center sits completed on the passenger seat. Marshall's savings of $132,000, now diverted to dementia research rather than Harlan's boat fund, are doing real good. I walk through rooms that once trapped decades of perfect performances, my heels striking confident rhythms against hardwood that belongs to me. In the kitchen, I run my hand along countertops where Joyce orchestrated holiday meals with military precision. My phone chimes with a message from Betty. Found something you should see. The attachment opens to reveal a photograph I thought lost forever. Dad and me at 14, covered in sawdust, grinning beside the newly completed fence. What catches my breath isn't the image itself, but where Betty found it. Not in the family album, but thumbtacked above Dad's workbench in the tool shed, the one place no one bothered to sanitize after he died, the one place he kept what truly mattered. Evening finds me in my new garden, surrounded by my chosen family. Sarah tops off wine glasses while Warren discusses the nature sanctuary plans for the Idaho acreage. Betty and Douglas raise their glasses as I place Dad's hammer in the center of the table. To building things that last, Douglas says. Across town, a young woman named Claire meets me for coffee weekly, her eyes slowly losing the haunted look they held when she first described her family's campaign of erasure. Your worth isn't measured by their recognition, I tell her, echoing Dad's wisdom. 1 year later, Christmas lights twinkle against fresh snow as I set the table with Dad's collection of mismatched ornaments. No perfect centerpiece, no color-coordinated place settings, just chairs. filled with people who choose to be here. Joyce pauses in the doorway, uncertainty etched in new lines around her eyes. Your place is there, I say, pointing to the chair I've saved for her. Not forgiveness, exactly, but possibility. As I take my seat at the head of the table, I realize the true inheritance wasn't property or money. It was the proof I was always enough, even when they tried to write me out of their story. I raise my glass toward Dad's empty chair, his holly mug catching the light. Some things can never be erased.